pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please. Councilmember Redmond. Here. Councilmember Collins. Here. Councilmember Stearns. Here. Mayor Pro Tem Sackler. Here. Mayor Clore. Here. All right, we will move right into our special presentation from Caltrans with Carrie Moltz. Moltz? Thank you.
You.
Thank you.
Okay, very big project, very little time to tell you about it, so I speak fast anyway, so I'll try and slow down so you understand. A lot of papers in here, which we don't have to go over every single slide, but it's there for your information if you want to refer back to it. So I'm here to present the SAC Gap Combined project. It is, it's combined because it's actually two major projects that we put together strategically, and I'll get to that in a minute, but it's the northbound lanes of I-5 from Dunsmuir up to the Black Butte overhead, the railroad. And then it's also the southbound bridge deck of the Dunsmuir Bridge on I-5. So the old arch one. So that's going to be replaced. And then we're going to put the concrete in similar to what you have on the southbound. So this is finishing up the project that we started years ago. We know that life was really rough traffic-wise in the past. We've tried to learn our lessons a bit on that, and some of the strategies that we implemented this time, or at least the goals that we had, is we're going to go for 2 lanes northbound as much as we possibly can. That really will help truck traffic going up that grade to be in one lane, and then everyone else will be in the other lane. Hopefully that really helps a lot. We're minimizing the ramp closures as much as possible. We're keeping Lake open, because we know it's really important for the downtown businesses. It may be closed like a night just to do the HMA overlay kind of a thing, but it'll be open for the most part. And those were the 3. So it's one of the things that we did just to help with the whole process is we used an innovative delivery method, which means we hired a contractor during design. This way we could bounce ideas off of them, look for efficiencies, and really nail down the staging. Otherwise, we'd put it out the bid and the contractor would come back to us later and say, okay, this is what we want to do for staging, and we wouldn't be able to tell you what's happening. We give you a best guess, but that's about it. So anyway, I have staging plans to talk to you about tonight, and this will we'll kind of fly through them, as I said, because there's a lot of the cross sections in here. But it's just to kind of give you an overview of where work is going to happen when. It's a 3-year project. We're basically starting in the south and working our way north. So, any questions before we dive in? Yes.
You may have already addressed this, and I just missed it. The polyester treatment of some sort on the northbound lanes in 2023, what is that?
Polyester, it's the fancy concrete that's on bridge decks. It's kind of, how would you describe it? I brought help here tonight, by the way, construction and our general contractor. It's an epoxy type of product. Very hard, and then
so
you
it's an overlay on top of the bed?
Yeah, so for that Sacramento River Bridge and overhead, the northbound lanes are going to have an epoxy just to harden things up. And then as you climb up to Mott, and it's already concrete there, the number 3 lane, the outside lane where the trucks take, there's a lot of chain wear, and so there's kind of the rutting in there.
Oh, yeah.
So we're kind of going to grind it and put that epoxy on so it's smooth again.
Got it. Thank you so much.
You're
That's
welcome.
exactly what I want to know.
I didn't go over scope. I apologize on that one. Okay, so 2023 is a lot of the poly. Because we're starting a little bit late in 2023, we're already pushing into May. I can't believe how time is flying. This item, the poly on the bridge and the poly on that third lane, it might get moved to the last year, but it's kind of one of those you can squeeze it in whenever you would like. But otherwise, they're going to start putting up the false work on the Sacramento River Bridge, and the false work is going to be this big platform so that the park underneath can still be used. And then the road is protected, and the river's protected, and all that too. So, but there's a little bit of time where the park will be closed for about a month, setting it up, and then it'll be open again after all the cranes are out of the way and stuff. And then we're going to start the concrete between Mott and Pioneer. Pioneer's the other railroad bridge. So if you go to the next page, it kind of shows it shows the cross sections in the area of work for where the Sacramento Bridge and overhead. So when we do the northbound lanes, we're going to have everyone on the southbound bridge, and we have 2 lanes going north, 1 lane going south. It's tight, but we squeezed it in. And then flipping through kind of just goes through showing you kind of where the area of work is going to be and where traffic's going to be. So it usually says like a 12-foot lane open, and there's 2 in a row there, so there's 2 lanes for them going northbound. When you flip to the page that says, oh, you do have it up. Excellent. Yes, this page, as you'll notice, there's ramp closures identified as well. So when we're working on that bridge, the Dunsmuir Avenue northbound on-ramp will be closed. There will be signage to help people find another way to get back onto the freeway, but just that on-ramp it's busy around here. It will be closed. And then at the Pioneer Bridge, there's bridge rail work that's going to happen. That is one short little segment where we won't be able to squeeze into northbound lanes, but it's really only, I don't know, a quarter of a mile or less long for where you cross over and come back. And it should be fairly short, but no ramp closures on that one. Moving to stage 1D, 1E, this is where we really get cranking with the JPCP. Now, we're going to be a little bit different with our traffic handling to do this northbound, and that's where we're going to do a traffic split. And I don't know if anyone's been in Southern California or coming up on 99 in this last year or two, but in Bakersfield they did this, and in Merced they did this, where you're going to have 2 lanes of traffic going southbound and 1 lane of traffic going northbound on the southbound lanes. And then on the northbound lanes, you're going to have an area of work and an area of northbound traffic. So we're going to have signs up because it's going through town, or they're going to miss ramps if they stay over here. The local traffic, stay in your right lane, so they'll have access to the ramps to get off into town. So it'll be a little bit confusing maybe at first, but we'll fix our signs as we need to so people know if they want to go through and just get to Oregon, they stay in the left. If they want to hit Mount Shasta, they stay in the right. Okay, 2024. This is when we actually change the deck out. It's 1 season, get cranking in April, be done by end of October, so that for snow season we're open. And this goes for all our work, by the way. We're off the road during the snow. Everything will be open. Mm-hmm.
During, holidays, July 4th, Labor Day, Memorial Day, that kind of thing, are you able to remove equipment so we have full flow on all those lanes, or is it once everything's staged, you need to keep it there?
Once it's staged for this season, it'll remain the 2 and 2. Oh, but that does remind me, this is also daytime, you definitely have the 2 and 2. Nighttime, there may be just the 1 lane going northbound, and they'll do the need that lane for access for concrete trucks and stuff coming in. But that also, if there's an emergency, we can definitely get out of the way and open that extra lane up. Okay, back to 2024. Now the concrete is going to be starting at Pioneer and work its way up to Abrams Lake. And then we're also doing the actual bridge, so we'll have 2 different areas of construction. This section, we didn't necessarily have room on the northbound lanes to be able to squeeze that extra lane in, but we have 2 northbound lanes and 1 southbound lane. And that takes us to 2025, and that's the end from Abrams up to Black Butte.
Can I ask one question?
Yes.
BOH stands for?
Bridge and overhead. So bridge because it's over water, and overhead because it's over railroad.
Thank you. Bridge and overhead, and OH is just overhead.
Yes, and I'm really good at my acronyms, so I apologize. Please ask.
Thanks.
Let's see, where are we? Kind of just more configurations. We're doing the split traffic again on this one. Yes.
That's the train bridge north of, is that the train bridge north of Truck Village?
Yes. Yes. So again, on the split traffic for a section of this 3rd year, and then when we get to the deets to Black Butte overhead, there is just a short section where we have to scrunch it down. This might be a little tight on this last one. But do you know how long that duration of the construction is for the 3F?
Yeah, it's about 30 to 60 days.
Okay, 30 to 60 days on that one. And last page is contacts, and I'll get you. So I'm Carrie Maltz. I'm the project manager. I may not be project manager by the time this project is finished, but I'll probably still be in project management somewhere. You can still contact me, and I'll direct you to the right person. Nikki Mallory is our resident engineer. She is not allowed to go anywhere for the next 3 years. She will be here. And she's also local. She knows the area, and she worked on the southbound one and has some lessons learned and kind of knows where the hiccups happened and knows the history of that one. And then I also have Tony with me here tonight. He's representing Welsh Myers. They're the contractor on the project. That's the end of my presentation. If there's any more questions.
Thank you very much. I'm
Yeah.
assuming your late start is due to the snow issue, maybe this year.
I would love to blame it on that, but no, it's a little bit of getting contract. We're still waiting for one federal document to get signed and back to us, and fine-tuning design and working with the CMGC. There's the process. You have to get like an agreed price to make sure we're not spending too much money too, and that took a little while. But we gave you guys an extra year, actually, a little reprieve before we come in.
And will construction go until winter each year, or do you?
Yeah,
okay.
basically you'll see us April through October.
Okay.
For the most part. The bridge work could go through winter technically, but any kind of paving definitely need the warmer temperatures for it.
And Carrie,
I have one more question, sorry. And then on the Mount Shasta off-ramp, it says 1D 25 day. Is that 1 day to 25 day anticipated closure?
So 1D is referring to the stage, and that's where the traffic, there's the split, and in 1D, they're actually on the inside lane. During that time, for 25 days, they're going to do like a rapid set concrete to try and reopen that quickly. And then for 1E, the inside or the outside lane, closer to the ramps, is where traffic flow is, so then the ramps will be open for that. So yeah, we tried to minimize any of these ramp closures as much as we could to about 25 days
Okay.
or less.
And timing is probably still unknown as to exactly when that will hit.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely, yeah. I do also want to say that we plan on having kind of a community open house with more of our staff there in Dunsmuir on, I believe it's May 10th is the date we have set. And so, your community, of course, is welcome to come all the way down to Dunsmuir and ask personal questions, or not personal questions, but, specific questions about the project.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Carrie? JPCP.
Jointed plain concrete pavement.
Got it.
It's just the pavement that goes up from Dunsmuir on the northbound lanes to Mott. That's JPCP. So it'll be continuation of that.
Okay, thank you.
One more question. So independent of this, I think you gave a presentation 4 or 5 years ago. I think it was you. Regarding Highway 89 and altering, especially westbound. Well, that's not South Road, but it's westbound at that point. Is that all very much on hold?
That is very much off the books now. Yeah, that was,
We add a lane to turn off on.
yeah, to turn into, that one, it was half Caltrans, half county, I believe it's there. And it didn't make their RTP. And so it's not on any list to ever put money on there. I think part of it was because some of the plan development didn't happen either, especially when we hit COVID. But, so, yeah, it is ways.
Any other questions? Okay, thank
Okay,
you so much.
I brought them all the way here. Please ask away. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
All right, we will move into public comment. Anyone wishing to speak on an agenda, on anything not on an agenda item, please come forward.
Of course, I don't feel exactly comfortable to speak to you without my service dog, Athena. But I will not allow you to abridge my First Amendment right again. During your meeting of 2/13/23, 4 council members abridged my First Amendment right by interrupting my allotted 180 seconds, starting after only 6 seconds. Prior to your meeting of 3/13/23, I had only days before asked the kind lady of Mount Shasta PD at the public window what was required to enter a public space with a service dog. After she consulted with someone out of my view, I was told that to establish the fact of being a service dog, it is understood that it is an, quote, act of good faith, end quote. No test, application, or requirement is necessary. It is not allowed to be asked for. Days later, I returned to the public window to further pursue knowledge on the topic and was told by a male on-duty officer that it can be asked, quote, what service does the pet provide, end quote. So in that vein, I submit, Athena, I often refer to her as my right arm, serves me faithfully in recovering from PTSD. If you desire further details, may I suggest, when you are 65 years old, ask your neighbor to bang on your house, attack you to the ground, taser you on your lower spine, put you in county jail for 4 days, and then I've been traumatized? That was 8 years ago. I do not want to let Mr. Redmond and Mr. Gibson repeat that attack. My dear friend Ed Valenzuela is often quoted in this room, and I would like to do the same. Ed, many months ago, told me, quote, it was a setup and you fell for it, end quote. A few city council
Mr. Ream,
meetings
you are not
earlier,
allowed to
you
attack our
added
council.
a paragraph to the preamble of the agenda, which I have never seen before. It is clearly directed at me and Athena and reappears on tonight's agenda. It is an effort to intimidate me and once again abridge my First Amendment right. Here I stand before you, weakened but not muted.
Anyone else wish to come up and speak to public comment? Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Tracy J. Costello. How you doing? 107 North C Street. That C is in the word caterpillar, not C as in an ocean. Anyway, you can think of the ocean. Me and Kathy have thought of the ocean before. The what is it called? The Pacific Gyre. I'm not impressed with that at all.
Do you need some help?
Anyway, I noticed we had someone from Caltrans here. I'd just like to add some fuel to the fire. Not enough is being done about potholes by Caltrans. And this idea of reducing the traffic flow through our area to one lane, that happened several years ago when they were working on the road out here. That was totally ridiculous. Traffic was backed up for miles. They want to reduce it to one lane. Maybe they should do that at night. Anyway, the potholes are ridiculous. I haven't taken the effort to call Caltrans, but the potholes. There's one about 100 to 150 yards this side of Lassen Lane going north. A huge pothole in the right lane, this big and round. They don't do a thing about it. They should have patrolling people to check these out and get them marked and filled. It's totally ridiculous. I voted in Prop 6, a tax on diesel fuel and gas to provide better highway maintenance. And that's because the legislature has diverted the weight funds from trucks to their general fund so they can spend it willy-nilly. That's your legislature at work and Gavin Newsom at work. He's not doing much for us. And this idea about converting to electric cars by 10 years from now, that's the worst thing I've ever heard of. You know, electric cars don't pay much in gas tax, I can assure you, if anything. So who's going to pay for the maintenance on the roads then? Like I say, I voted for Prop 6 was the tax on diesel and gas and increased DMVPs all for the roads. I think that the legislature's not doing their part. They should get some of those weight fees back to the highway funds. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience wish to come up and speak? Anyone online?
Our first speaker from home will be Johanna.
Hello, Johanna. Begin when ready.
Good evening, City Council and staff. I just wanted to say I really appreciated that update from Caltrans with all that detail. I hope we can get a copy of that report. I've actually been following the I-5 construction and noise for several years. And I actually brought up this 3-year construction issue during my written comments to the Planning Commission meeting last week. And I asked that noise be considered during the construction since it will be for 3 years, as well as we need a more permanent solution. I have an idea for a temporary solution that might be quite cost effective, and that is that we do a large, 8-foot, 10-foot tall dirt berm on the east side of the northbound lanes so that it will help mitigate the noise from the traffic. So I live about 800 feet or so from I-5. When there is no construction, the I-5 noise is somewhere between high 50s on the low end to mid 80s on the high end, if you do a decibel reading. And like with the window open, the average constant noise, anyway, the noises are really loud, and so I'm hoping that we can get a dirt berm from Caltrans. I'm sure they have many sites with lots of extra soil that could be put there. They did such a wonderful job during the fires and quickly mitigating all the tree trunks and damage. And, even if it's a bunch of wood chips, that would be great, but something to help buffer the noise from our town, because that noise, not only am I and other residents impacted by this noise, but this noise travels into the city and makes our quiet haven and restful area kind of, it makes it more noisy and not as pleasant. So anyway, just something to consider. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Johanna.
Our next speaker is Michael Williams.
Hello, Michael Williams. Begin when ready.
Thank you. Hello, City Council members and staff. I'm here to just make a comment on an issue related to sidewalks. There's a road treatment called Edge Lane Roads that creates space for vulnerable road users, pedestrians, and cyclists on the roadway. It supports the use that currently exists where people are often walking or riding on the road, the lower volume roads, not Mount Shasta Boulevard or Lake Street or roads like that, but some of our residential roads. But this is a treatment that's being used all over the country, and it's being used for many different reasons. I'm not sure exactly why Alta chose not to include it in the transportation plan. We did talk about it in the technical advisory, a couple of technical advisory committee meetings, but they chose not to include it, as far as I know. But one of the reasons is that some communities, some neighborhoods, actually don't want sidewalks. They think it ruins the rural character and feel of their neighborhood. And this treatment is a way to create spaces for those non-motorized users on the street in the way that it's being used now. You know, kids walking right by my house here in Washington. Kids are walking in the street because there's not a continuous sidewalk available to them. And they're walking essentially in the travel lane. So, and that's why, I forgot the kid who got hit on Cloud so many years ago and dragged by a motor vehicle late at night when he was returning home. He got hit on Upper McLeod. If we had had an Edge Lane Road treatment in place, that likely wouldn't have happened. Anyway, so I just wanted to make the City Council aware of that treatment. It's very suitable for small towns and rural areas, and it's something that is rapidly growing in popularity. So that's all. Thank you.
Through the chair.
Sure.
Michael, what is the name of that treatment? Could you spell it out?
Edge Lane Road.
Edge Lane, E-D-G-E?
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
And just to comment, you have the nation's expert on the treatment here in town, willing to help.
Thank you very much. Okay, we will close public comment, move on to council and staff comments. Todd, would you like to start us off?
Sure. So the Enhanced Infrastructure Finance District project, we finally have a date with the county for it to be heard on May 2nd. And I had Joseph Dieguez from Cosmont call and answer some question on the part of Ed. Ed's going to be carrying the water on this. I'll be there in attendance to answer any questions. You know, Ed reading his tea leaves, you know, has a sense that this may, you know, it may not be picked up, but I think that, you know, we need to make the case that there really is no downside to this. It's just, it's potential tax revenue in their pockets. And so I'll be there to make that case. But at least one way or another, we'll have an answer, and then we can move forward and decide whether or not the city wants to take this on its own. The next is the issue of receivership in the old hospital. We ran into a snag last week. We were to have a hearing where all expectations were that the old hospital would have been placed into receivership. The day before, the Bay Area Receivership Group, who's doing the work for us, contacted us and said that the cost of demolition with asbestos and other issues on that property would be somewhere between 150 and 200,000, and they believe the property has negative equity, so they don't want to move forward with it because they can't make money. John Noreen and John Kenny, we've had some back and forth with them. We're meeting with them on Thursday of this week. I don't see how we can pay the Bay Area Receivership Group for their work if they don't follow through. A. B, why didn't you do your due diligence up front to figure out whether or not this was worth your time? And what's our path forward? And one of the things that was suggested is that, we could find other properties that are ripe for receivership in other jurisdictions up here and bundle them together into a receivership package, but that takes years. And so that's not the route we want to go. So we need to figure out what the next steps are. I'm trying to get creative with this, and I'll be back with a report after Thursday.
Through the chair.
The next is the housing element. We had the first Planning Commission hearing on that. I mean, the majority of the housing element, I think there is a little bit of confusion on it in that this is a very bare bones housing element. What's in here is the majority of it is required by law for us to get up to speed with anything that has passed since the last housing element and adopt zoning that reflects state law and some policies and objective language that the state wants us to have in there that is not, it's more advisory than it is that we have to act on it, but we need the language in. There was some discussion about some properties that the Plan West considered, HCD considered surplus, and whether or not those were appropriate locations. So we're re-looking at that. And, ultimately the Planning Commission's role is to, make a recommendation to council to adopt the housing element. And once the council adopts the housing element, that isn't the end of it. It ends up being then an ongoing negotiation with HCD where they ask for additional stuff to be placed into it, and if we don't get certified. But along this whole way, if HCD opens it up and asks for additional information, there will continue to be public comment period on what they're asking for. So it's going to be a longer process than we thought, but we're on a short time frame and we need to get this out of the next Planning Commission. So that's an update on that. For the election issues, if we're looking at a TOT increase or we're looking at the drainage impact or assessment fee, both of these are off-year election items, so they would be considered a special election. And talk to the election clerks. They're going to have a calendar of all the timelines that we need to meet at the end of this month. They don't have it yet. There is some question whether the drainage impact fee, depending on how it's categorized, whether that can go in on an off-year election. But all in all, if they both can go on, or just one, either way, it's not cheap, as you know, with special elections. It's going to be about $23,000 to float this. So just keep that in mind. We got word back from the courts about the appeal on the Golden Eagle Charter School. We all know Golden Eagle moved to a new site. The appeal failed on all counts, and there were many of them. And the petitioner was rebuked on page 13 of the report on many different issues. And you know, it's just unfortunate that we have this kind of, you know, using CEQA as a cudgel. There are places, obviously, there are lots of places for CEQA and challenges that are reasonable, but to use them on just about everything that comes, any development project that comes before the body, is a little bit unfortunate. But in this case, the petitioner is at a crossroads where we have, I believe we have enough that if we need to, if the city is directed to, the city can file a frivolous litigant lawsuit against the petitioner and ensure that this person can no longer file lawsuits. And that's what I've got.
Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Thank you. This last week, I attended a lessons learned meeting that included all the chiefs of police of the county, the fire chiefs, as well as the CAL FIRE unit chiefs, and we discussed what went well and what went wrong at the Mill and the McKinney fires and how to prepare ourselves. I'm just going to hit a couple of the highlights. They're going to work on a county-wide law enforcement mutual aid agreement. One of the things that slows down getting the money back is each fire we have to have a signed MOU for that fire. This would streamline that so that we would have a standard MOU for response, which would allow us to get reimbursed faster for our expenses. One of the other issues that came up with the fire was that for once they were evacuated, it was hard to get city staff back into the areas. So for Lake Shasta, for example, with no ID on their city staff, they weren't allowed into the evacuation zone, which meant that they couldn't get paid because the finance director wasn't allowed back in. So the recommendation that I got from that is we'll look at getting all our crucial staff, public works and everybody, getting them ID, so if we ever have that back, we won't be hampered with having to leave a evacuation site or what have you. And then the other thing was being able to use the search and rescue. They're going to be trained on how to identify, or they'll be trained to handle finances for us, so that'll take one less thing if should we have that emergency. And they're training volunteers, so they're looking for CART volunteers. These will be trained volunteers of the community that'll be trained on how to operate and work an evacuation checkpoint. Of course, this is after the initial, so it'll be law enforcement handling the initial checkpoints. But this will free us up to be able to do more things as an incident goes, especially in long term. So if anybody out there wants the information, they can get a hold of me at the police department, and I'll get them in touch with the fire so that they can volunteer for CART. Oh, and then on a positive note, we did get the official confirmation last week that we received the $2.9 million in Prop 64 grant funding. Awesome. So I will be coming to council here forthwith for the authorization for the 7th officer position that the grant's going to be paying for.
Great news. Thank you. All right. Council, any updates?
Questions?
Sure. Let me get through my updates and then we can do questions. Is that okay? I met with Jonathan Duncan last Friday. He took me on a little tour of the fuel reduction project that the fire department is helping with, and I would recommend whoever's interested, council, if you're interested, to get a hold of him, and he really took me down in there so you can get a visual on how much work there is. You can see a lot of what the initial issue was with how dense it is, and there's still a lot of dense foliage that they're trying to figure out how to get to because it gets pretty marshy down by the railroad tracks, or down by the freeway. But they're hard at it, and it looks really, really good. So just wanted to give acknowledgement there. And then to Gibson, I've been noticing a policeman stationed at the four-way stop at Pine Street, and he must be very busy because he is nailing them right and left. So that's obviously a spot where we needed some extra help, making sure people are stopping. And myself and council members Stearns and Stackleth went to Lola last week, I believe. Was that last week? So we had an update with our cities at the City of Weed location, and it was lovely. That's all I have. Questions?
Other updates or questions?
Questions?
Okay. In terms of the receivership hearing, was the hearing continued, and if so, until what date?
It was continued for a month. I don't remember the date offhand.
Okay.
I can get back to you on it.
Probably 4 weeks from
Yeah,
last Thursday.
I mean, pretty much. I can talk to John Reen.
Okay. And in terms of litigious plaintiff, if a person has been identified a litigious plaintiff, they're not prohibited from filing any future complaints or petitions, but they are prevented from filing a future complaint or petition until a judge first reviews the petition or complaint and authorizes the filing. So when a person gets that label, they can't file anything without prior court approval.
It has to be pre-vetted.
Yes.
And there's another element to it, depending on the type of project that it is. If you're deemed such as a frivolous litigant, then depending on the project, the petitioner can be forced to post funds for any damages that anybody involved with the project may incur. And so that is another limitation.
Right.
Right. Any other questions or updates? All right.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
In terms of the elections that you talked about, TOT or a special assessment or drainage, I didn't understand the full import of what you were saying.
So it gets complicated, and I'm not sure I understand all of it either, whether it's an assessment, an impact fee, in how it's calculated. For instance, this gets down a rabbit hole. I'll do this really quickly. In this case, the drainage impact fee right now, we're talking about $1 being paid to fix our failing infrastructure. And what the firm that we've retained have done is paid for proprietary, very high resolution digital imagery, and have, very finely designated every parcel within the city, and residences will pay a flat fee that I haven't heard the exact number on yet, where those that have, it's a commercial property, it'll be based on square footage and the amount of impervious surface on those sites, and basically how much runoff these sites produce. And so there's something about how this methodology is categorized will determine whether or not it can go on an off-year special election, or whether it needs to be on, to compete with the presidential election in 2024.
So this is not a Prop 218 sort of procedure?
It's not, yeah, and that's a recent ruling.
Okay, thanks.
Apparently, drainage improvements they're not alike. They will never be like 218 sewer, sanitary sewer, and water improvements, correct?
So,
Let's go to a direct vote, and it's 50% plus one to pass. Unlike 218, it's whether you have enough protest votes. Is that right?
yes and no. I mean, again, it depends on how John's trying to parse this information on exactly what this would be viewed as. If it's, and I forget which one is which, but one requires the citizens of the community to pre-vote to get an idea of where they're at before it actually even gets onto the onto the election docket. So, but I'll get a reading by the end of the week. I reminded John last week I needed it from him, and I spoke to him again this morning, so it's a priority.
All right. On to number 6, any committee updates?
None.
Okay, and we are at agenda item number 7, consent agenda. The city manager recommends approval of the following consent agenda items. All resolutions and ordinances on this agenda or added hereto shall be introduced or adopted as applicable by title only, and the full reading thereof is hereby waived. A, approval of minutes, April 3rd, 2023, continued and special meeting, April 10th, 2023, special and regular city council meetings. B, committee minutes, beautification committee, March 15th, 2023. C, approval of disbursements, accounts payable, 411, 418, and 419, 2023. Total gross payroll and taxes for period ending 4/2/23. D, second reading and adoption of ordinance CCO-23, an amendment to ordinance 18.91, cannabis industry land use.
All right, so I'll move to approve the consent agenda items A through C and D, which is CCO-23-03
03.
by title only.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And number 8, public hearing, first reading of ordinance CCO-23-04, Chapter 19.03 of the Mount Shasta Municipal Code, Parklet Dining. Todd?
Yes. So it's my understanding that as businesses were getting ready to potentially reopen during COVID, there was a 4-month test period where certain businesses were allowed to, to put up parklets that you see still up. And that was supposed to end at 4 months. And I know that they've proven popular for a lot of folks. And what this does is it better defines the type of building materials, standards, wind loads, and in how the structures are constructed in order to allow the owner to clean underneath them and not accumulate debris. What are the open clear zones on a sidewalk that's required by ADA to allow people to get through, and just more fully regulate what can be done and what can't be done.
All right, any questions?
City Manager, regarding the existing 2 parklets, they would have to make improvements as necessary to meet this new standard adopted, correct? They wouldn't be grandfathered in under the old rules.
I haven't thought that through. I mean, I think they would have to be looked at in light of the new ordinance, because I think, in some cases, some of the construction I've seen, clearly it's created a situation where drainage isn't happening the way it should, leaf litter isn't being removed, and in one case seems to be a heating source that I'm concerned may cause fires, and so yeah, thanks for that question.
To the chair. City Manager, please help me understand the process that these lengthy details of what you can and can't do, did this go through the planning committee, or where did this come from?
Where did this ordinance come from?
Where all those details, yeah.
Well, part of it is my experience with parklets in New York City. Part of it is there was a parklet ordinance, I believe it was in Santa Rosa. I scavenged part of that. And there was a lot more detail in, obviously, New York City's and the Santa Rosa's, and I wanted to make sure that when we're looking at what we have up here, that we're not over-regulating, even though this seems like if we're over-regulating, right? But I want to make sure that we're also not getting ourselves into a situation where we're creating potential traffic issues, snow removal issues, evacuation issues during a fire, and we're not getting into a situation where, Public Works can't do their work.
Thank you.
Question?
Yes. Frankly, I generally like the parklets draft. I did have some questions and some suggestions. I guess this is the time for questions, not suggestions. Or maybe I'll tell you what, maybe I can just wait until afterwards and I'll combine them.
Sure.
And to the chair, I have about 10 different detailed questions on some of these elements. Is this not the time to do that?
So what we've done in the, yeah,
It's going to lead to an amendment or change.
I would say right now is general questions, and then afterwards we can get into the detailed.
Okay, that's fine.
That seems to flow better, I think.
Sure.
Any other questions before? Okay, we will go to public comment. Anyone wish to come up and speak to this item?
Mayor, if you could open a public hearing.
Sorry, we'll open a public hearing.
First, I'd like to point out that the term parklet is quite Orwellian, for the effect of the parklets is to reduce parking. Also, as in the previous ordinance, the Mount Shasta PD is in charge of yet another business. Can they fairly and equitably enforce these new laws? Problematic is section 190306V, quote, lack of use more than 2 weeks may result in revocation, end quote. How about winter conditions? Section 1903.11F states, quote, amplified music is allowed as long as noise levels do not disturb neighboring uses, end quote. I find that quite revealing in a multitude of ways. Recently, during the middle of the day while gardening, I was playing music from my truck, which I was loading next to my property. My familiar neighbor passed by across the road, displaying his one-finger salute to me, which he is so fond of doing. Within minutes, I am approached by a Mount Shasta PD officer on duty who informs me
Excuse me, Mr. Reed, we need to stick to the agenda item, or please see yourself to the seat, please.
Would you quit interrupting me?
You do
I'm
not tell
talking
me-
about music, and that is a
Officer
quote
Gibson.
from the...
Please sit down,
Please sit down.
or stick to the agenda item.
I'm quoting the
This
ordinance.
is not negotiable.
This is not negotiable.
Stick to the agenda item or have a seat.
The quote was from the ordinance. Amplified
I have
music.
said what I have said. Stick to the agenda item or have a seat.
Am I allowed to talk about music?
You're allowed to talk about parklets.
In the ordinance on parklets, it refers to music. Am I allowed to talk about music?
In a parklet.
In a parklet, right. Am I allowed to talk about enforcement of the ordinance?
This is disruptive. You're
Oh,
public.
it's disruptive now.
So you are heckling us.
Would
It
you
is-
like me to, maybe you should write what I should put down.
Mr. Reed,
Mr. Gibson.
For to rehash something that happened on some other issue. That's your 3-minute public comment. If you'd like to discuss this, then that's what you're here for.
Would anyone else like to come up and speak to public comment? Okay, we will close public hearing. She said there was no one online? All right. Discussion. Yeah.
I'm willing to start.
Go ahead.
Or you want to start?
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I got a little questions. City Manager, I guess I'm directing these kind of at you for clarification on these things, on a lot of the details here. Like the south section on South Manchester Boulevard from Sisson to Lake is 1 parklet per city block, and on the north down to Alma is 4. Is that just relative to what's currently a restaurant, which I'm assuming is the only people that can put a parklet out is people who are a restaurant and or a bar?
Correct. And again, putting this together, you've got to use your own just discretion if council so chooses to change that number or the district where parklets are allowed. That's certainly your prerogative.
Right, okay. Let me see if I can get, I guess I should just go through these in order. This is 1903-030 limitations, and this is section C, traffic limitations. Here it says parklets must be at least 15 feet from any street corner intersection, and then there is number C. There's another place where they can be, but wouldn't you know, that faded out. Where it says you can go down to 7.5 feet with city permission. And let me see if I can get these.
I can pull it up here if you want.
Does this ring a bell for you?
It does, and the issue is, what are the sight lines at a particular intersection? Typically, you want 15 feet to be able to see around that corner.
Right.
To make sure that, you're not getting yourself into trouble or hitting somebody. And so the idea here is, depending upon an intersection, it may be, you may be allowed, an applicant may be allowed some discretion based upon, an intersection that has no obstructions.
Okay.
And clear sight lines, and there are potentially like 2 lanes where you're able to see. So it's really about the angles of where you can see around a corner and how safe it is. That's more of a public works, traffic engineering.
No, got it. That clarifies that for me. Thank you. When people are submitting letters of support from property owners, there's one is request for property owners, adjacent property owners support, and then at a minimum, applicants should submit copies of, that they've sent a letter to property owners that they've been notified. If you had somebody, I'm just trying to look at the reality of, most people are fine, but one neighbor really doesn't want it. I'm just going to tell you, I notified everybody. I mean, how does that get resolved? Or does somebody who's a neighbor who doesn't want it, do they have any recourse?
Yeah, they can show up here, or they can send a letter to the city that becomes part of the record for either planning commission.
Okay, yeah, I'm just trying
It's
to
just-
understand how this
and,
is
you know,
gonna.
and again, when you're writing these things, especially on this one, I had a little extra time, and I might go down the detail rabbit hole too far. So if
Well, no, and
if
yeah, I err on the side of not too much regulation.
Yeah,
and
I hear
so,
you.
These are just questions, and one of them, in one place it says you need 48 inches on a sidewalk clearance, and on another place it says 5 feet. The 4 feet one is the federally mandated sidewalk clearances should be maintained at 48 inches, but in several other places it talks about 5 feet. Is there some distinction between whether it's 4 or 5? Or?
4 is allowed, 5 is preferable.
Okay. There are 36-inch guideposts.
But can I back up to the other one?
Yeah.
I don't, it sounds like maybe I didn't, because I changed this to reflect one measurement, and that was 5 feet. So I'm wondering if you might have gotten a slightly previous version.
Okay, no, that's fine. I'm just trying to
Yeah, no,
make
these
sure
are
I
great,
understand.
great questions, thank you.
These guidepost things that they have to install 36-inch guideposts with reflective elements between corner ends of the park that facing the street. Those aren't to affect any barrier element, as in, like, if somebody bangs it, it's going to resist, because they can't put anything in the ground.
Correct.
Or into the street. So is this just a lower tensile strength thing? It just has reflection, like,
Neither.
hi, I'm here?
Well, that part. So the idea is that it's tall enough that it can be seen by a driver, and the reflective element is, at night, is, for, the few people that drive impaired, it may be one more thing that shows
Right,
them,
okay.
do not hit this.
Got it. And then next one is lighting. All lighting must be downward facing and turned off outside of business hours. Well, that's fine. But downward facing, the string of Costco 2-inch bulbs obviously cannot qualify. Is what you're saying
Yeah,
here?
I'm not so much worried about that, that's more festive decoration. I'm considering, lighting that puts out, a significant number of lumens, that's downward facing.
Like a distraction for
Right.
traffic.
And light pollution.
And then there's separate electrical and plumbing permits. And I thought, plumbing? Would there be a situation where plumbing would go out to one of these things?
Potentially a sink.
I mean, do they do?
Yeah,
Do they do that?
I can answer that, yeah. In some situations, you have to have a hand washing sink.
yeah.
For the service staff readily available in that area. So they might have one of those things, just like with just any sort of,
Cleaning station.
with not just a cleaning station, but just potable water that's pumped up.
Yep.
For hand washing.
Right.
That way. So that might be the plumbing in that, is there where they would have to.
Yep.
Just have something to collect the brown water.
Thank you.
No
Appreciate that. Sorry about this, Mayor.
No.
Outdoor dining areas, these are design standards, must maintain a minimum 6-foot distance between tables and chairs. 6 feet between stations?
The ability to move around. It's the ability to move around each table, that, and again, if that was reduced to 4, that would be fine.
Well, I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah.
I mean, like inside, when you see booths that are back to back to back to back to back.
Yeah.
A parklet is going to be semi-expensive, and they're going to want to get as many people as they can
Right.
in this place, because it's where everybody wants to hang when it's gorgeous out.
Yeah, that's again, another reasonable comment. We can reduce that to 4 if you
Well,
like.
and again, I'm just trying to understand how to make it work, because, this is the first time we've had this level of detail, and
Yeah.
I just found myself involved in,
Why?
wow, would that be? And,
May I offer, and then you can please keep going, but as a possible solution to this, as we come up with things that we think should be altered, I think in order to keep it within our realm of council approval, after we speak about it, maybe we can all email it to Kathy and Todd, and then that can be incorporated into a second reading which would be at your discretion to see what works, what doesn't, and then that
Yeah.
will come to us
Sure,
again.
and you can couch it kind of generically as amended,
Right.
as per comments submitted. to
Yeah.
the
Madam
city.
Mayor, that is certainly an approach worthwhile, but it would be a further first reading. It wouldn't be a second
Yeah,
reading.
right, that's true.
And it could be that some of the comments that arise tonight can already get checked off
Yeah,
by
maybe if they're
council
minor
approval.
enough, we can do
Yeah.
it as amended tonight.
do you want me to stop?
No, please keep going.
I want to stop. So as of now, the only amendment that sounds, from what you were saying, Jeff, is the 4-foot changing from 6 to 4. Okay, that's.
And I would be
you can
supportive of
operate
that.
And all the other ones seem like points of clarification for you, correct?
Yeah, and I found the 5-foot clear pedestrian through zone. It's in 19-03-080. Design must maintain a minimum 5-foot clear pedestrian through zone in the sidewalk corridor. And that was where the earlier one had said 4, and I just,
And that got readjusted, and I might not have sent that over. I found that discrepancy as well.
and because I don't know what it is, the next one is, what is a wheel stop?
You'll see, these orange things out in the roadway. It's basically like when you're backing up somewhere, it's that, so you don't hit the curb or another object behind it. It's the piece that you hit with your tires that say, don't try to back over this or you'll damage your vehicle.
Thank you. Canopies, there's a section here about roof structures, canopies, and covers that I was just confused. There's a number of things that just didn't make any sense to me, like portable outdoor gas-fired heating appliances such as propane heaters are prohibited inside tents, canopies, and membrane structures. But there's a lot of other language about this is how you, if you're going to have these heaters, this is where you got to put them, and so far away from this, that, and the other thing. And the one in particular was canopy, that said, well, you can't have it if you have a canopy, but you can have it under a canopy if it's this far away from things. And I was just,
Well, no, if you've got a canopy that those,
and maybe I need a definition of the term. What do you mean by canopy?
a like tent-like structure that covers.
Okay, so tent-like.
The idea here is we don't want that canopy to go up in flames. And
Yeah.
Councilperson Stearns brought up something that I think he'll bring up again here is, well, is there another source for heating that we can look at that may not be a fire hazard? And we can, I need to talk to the building inspector about what's acceptable and what's not.
Okay, good. I'm almost done.
No, please take your time. And would umbrella fit into that same, because I know Sparky's has umbrellas and Pipeline has more of a canopy.
If your umbrellas are enough of a distance away from these heating sources, yeah, that was not meant to be part of the prohibition.
So umbrellas would be separated.
And that's why you've got lays out where you can use these and where you cannot. It's if you've got an overhead structure, a full cover of some kind, you just don't want that going up in flames.
Is there any height limitation on some canopy of some sort? Which is the...
Well, then it gets into the situation where whatever your heating source, if there is, whatever propellant is being used, gets spilled, is that going to then take off and burn that roof? I mean, I'm sure there is a height that would be acceptable, but I think that aesthetically, that height would be so high it would not work. You wouldn't be able to see storefronts.
Okay. And umbrellas, max 6 feet? I'm just, that is the size for a small table, like a two-top.
Yeah.
If you come out to a four-top,
Depends the size of the table, yeah.
right, but,
Yeah.
but moderate size four-top. And John, weigh in, would you,
Which one?
on size of the umbrella, on a four-top size round table with a hole in the middle, and
You're gonna want a 6-foot span at least.
I'm heading more towards 8, and to actually.
If you want that kind of lift, yeah, 8 foot would be, with all the wind ripping down Main Street, 8 feet, but.
Yeah, the other part is the wind load issue here. And the other consideration is the size of the umbrellas. The larger they are, the more of a potential, potential lawn dart or javelin, if you will.
Right, okay.
Well, and one of the things I'll have to do with umbrellas that I've definitely learned through the years is that to anchor them down. Because if you don't want those umbrellas getting next to a heater, you have to anchor both situations down, because the customer will come over and move both right next to their table on top of each other because they're cold.
Right.
Or the sun's right there, or whatever it is. The customers will just move everything right over them if you don't have it anchored down, thus causing another fire possibility. That way they'll put them right next to each other and then wonder why it caught on fire.
Well, and there's already provision in the ordinance for having them be secure.
Okay. But
But
yeah,
the question
like I said, we
is-
definitely have to do that because the customers will just
Yeah.
move both things onto the side of the street if that's where they're standing and waiting to even get a table. You have no idea how dumb customers can be.
Yeah, I think we should. And one last one. There shall be no more than 2 inches between planks of a platform. Does that mean 2 inches, a 2-inch gap between planks would be acceptable? I'm thinking, the parklet itself can't be any more than a ½ inch away from the curb. I'm thinking a ½ inch versus 2 inches. 2 inches, small children, we can lose them. I mean, it's,
Or hazard,
I'm
anyway.
thinking that's a pretty wide gap to allow, and I'm just wondering, is there thought behind that? That just seems really big.
Yeah, that's a Santa Rosa grab, and I didn't.
Drainage thing, right? The idea is for the water to drain through the.
Yeah, I think that's probably what they're thinking, but I didn't delve into it, and if it's something you want to change. I mean, it's kind of like, if you try it, and your plants, die, then maybe you go to the 2 inches on your own. Maybe we just let folks
Well, and
trial
I'm
and
just
error it.
thinking, a lot of footwear, especially women's footwear,
Yeah.
with a 2-inch gap might not work well. And I mean,
Well, legs
think
of
that
chairs as well.
I think that it says since it's no
yeah,
more
leg- yeah,
than,
legs of chairs.
Yeah.
That.
It's no more than, I mean, again.
it's not saying you have to have 2-inch gaps.
Right, but if you know how people are, they're going to go, oh, I can have 2-inch gaps. That's less boards. And
True.
what?
True.
And I think to John's point even more, which is that a chair leg disappears, you're going to have people dropping
So you're suggesting that
½ inch,
that particular provision
½ inch
be modified?
to ½ inch.
To a ½ inch.
Right.
I feel like you're beating around the bush with
So-
half it.
½ inch.
Come out and say it.
And that's it.
Okay. 19.03.030A indicates the parklets are to be on Castle Street, to be on Chestnut Street and Mount Shasta Boulevard. I'd suggest that we consider the possibility of including Castle Street from Alder to Maple in the ordinance. When we are thinking about where parklets might be, the natural inclination is think, where are the restaurants now? But that changes. It can change any month, any year. So in looking at structuring the ordinance, it might be better to think what areas might be appropriate. So I would suggest we consider adding to 19.03.03A Castle Street from Alder to Maple.
As part of the green lighting, just setting up ahead of time for the green lighting of Castle Street? Is that the idea?
Yeah.
Can do.
And unfortunately, may I borrow this? Because I lost it on my screen, lost the agenda on my screen. 19.03.060L.
I'm sorry, Tim, which one are you going to?
19.03.060L.
60, okay.
Yeah, 060 sub L. And it makes reference to exterior edges, well, that's not what no, I'm sorry. Exterior edges may be a fixture, planter, or bench. But could it also be something like a bollard or fencing?
I consider that under fixture. So it's really, it's just, you know, it could be a decorative element, it could be a protective element. It's just the idea that if you want to do something on that edge that adds some sort of either aesthetic value or protective value, then go ahead.
Okay. It might be helpful to add a definition for fixture in the definitions. In that same section, 060, but this would be subparagraph M. And I think that the intent there is that hanging plants, potted plants, small bushes, flowers, vines may be provided within the parklet, not must. So it's just just a change of word from must to may. Does that sound agreeable?
Yeah.
All right.
No, that's better.
Yeah, if it was me and it was my parklet, if I saw must, there would be a lot of plastic plants.
They would never die and always look good.
Never. They just have to be dusted.
And in 080T, as in trouble, I also had questions about the max 6 foot diameter of umbrellas.
One more time.
Yeah, I questioned also the limitation to a maximum 6 foot diameter umbrella. First of all, it wouldn't be a diameter. First of all, it would be it would be a diameter. But I'm thinking, why not a 7 foot or 9 foot? Because I think those are fairly standard commercial size umbrellas.
Which are?
7 or 9 foot umbrellas, something larger than a 6
They're bigger that way
foot.
to cover bigger tables, yeah.
Pardon?
They're bigger that way to cover bigger tables, yeah.
Yeah. So probably the intent is to have an umbrella that is secure, not going to blow away, and not going to interfere from one setting to the next.
Well, so my thinking on that, and again, this is up, if you guys want to make this change, great. You know, the parklets are pretty small generally, right? So if you've got your max is a 6 foot umbrella, you're able to fit more in there. And when you're then talking about going to a larger umbrella, you'll have less coverage of tables because you can only fit so many umbrellas in there. And the amount of force that you need to keep a larger umbrella braced to the ground so it doesn't take flight and spear somebody through the neck becomes a problem. But if you guys want to go larger, then
Yeah, I'm not sure whether we should necessarily put a strict footage on there. I think of the lodge out by the golf course. They have tables out there on the deck, and they have,
Yeah, the adjustable angle ones,
yeah, they have some smaller umbrellas, I think, but then they have some larger umbrellas.
depending on the table size, yeah.
Yeah, so that's what I was thinking of, is maybe we have a little more flexibility there, depending. And we got a hospitality expert at the other end of the table here, so he might be able to help with coming up with some ideas on that. And then, as you mentioned earlier, I raised the question. I can certainly understand concerns about fire hazards with propane heaters, but then there might be a question about whether electric heaters might work in some circumstances or not.
I can check with the building inspector. I've got to find out what, what the state would allow.
Mm-hmm. And then on 19.03-100, subparagraph H2, it's up to the city engineer to approve or deny. The question is whether we would want to build in a right of appeal to the city manager.
So on that one, if we've got a licensed engineer that says the design isn't going to work, in my mind, it's not appealable.
Okay, all right. That's a good answer. That does it for me.
When you meet with the building inspector about this last issue, will you also bring up the canopies, and if there is a height that won't obstruct, that could be an exception that Councilmember Collins was referring to? I just don't want to not explore all options for them.
Okay, so all these changes noted, because we're not going to be able to approve this, too many changes, right? Yeah, so I'm going to move that this item come back or be continued to the May
8th.
8th meeting.
Yeah, if there were cut and dry changes we could make here tonight. Yep, okay.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Agenda item 9, staff report sidewalk. Chief.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As you know, we've been working on a sidewalk program for the city for some time. The municipal code as it's written now lacks guidance or clarity on the mechanism to compel property owners to make repairs. The biggest problem with the municipal code as is now is it refers to state law, and the state law says 2 weeks. 2 weeks is an unrealistic time frame for somebody to repair their sidewalks. So the purpose of this tonight is to give you some of the ideas we're looking at. So one of the things we're looking at is that.
Can I pause for 1 second?
Yes, absolutely.
So a good preface, I should have said something earlier. So we have this a lot in our municipal code. It's bad precedent to try to restate state law in a municipal code, because then anytime state law changes, you've then got to adjust your municipal code, so it becomes a real hassle. Under State Highway Code 5610 to 5630 lays out what the responsibility of property owners is in terms of their frontages, and it's their responsibility to keep them repaired. And as the chief said, it allows 2 weeks notice. It's too short a period of time, but I guess what I'm getting at is we've got two options here. We can look at this, and there are some small amendments that the chief has suggested and John Kenny has okayed, and keep it as is, because we have a lot of other restated state law in our municipal code, or we can strike this section and just refer it to the state law and allow that to change as, you know, as time goes on. But so just, I'll stop. That's my preamble.
So continuing on here, so if we take option A, which is to give them more time and not just get rid of the municipal code altogether, one of the suggestions I have is we would provide the business with a 30-day notice, and that 30-day would allow them to either provide proof of correction or proof that they have retained a contractor to make the necessary corrections in a required amount of time. After that 30-day, if no such proof has been given, then a second 30-day notice would be issued, tolling for a total of 60 days for a property owner to show that either the work has been completed or it's been contracted to be completed. At that 60 days, then we would go with the California state law. The city would be able to come in, make the correction or make the repairs to the sidewalk as necessary, and then charge the property owner for said cost. One of the other things we're looking at is the way the municipal code is written now. It has no reference to our new 1.05 sections that was our administrative rights and hearings. So what the change would be would allow an appeals hearing to go through under section 1.05 of the Mount Shasta Municipal Code, which would get them to a director's hearing. So they would go up in front of our city engineer, and that would be used for, let's say it was a tree root issue, or it was a snowplow issue, or some other issue where they're saying, hey, I shouldn't have to pay for this. They would then have their rights, just like we would with the parking, and be able to have a hearing, appeals hearing, a hearing board, and have their rights there.
And determine a percentage of cost that should be borne by the city versus the property owner. And you know, in extreme cases, it would be the city's. You know, depending on the damage, and it clearly was, but was on the part of the city, then we would pick up that cost. But that's the purpose of the appeals process.
And then the other thing is just some direction. You guys were provided with the sidewalk maintenance handbook. If council decides that they would like us to bring these changes before council with the ordinance, we would propose that this handbook would also be made available to the public. We'd put it up on the city website, because now we're letting the public know that we're going beyond what the state of California says. And we're understanding that we're up in a rural area where there's not a lot of contractors, but we also have these expectations of this is how it's going to be done. So we're just looking for your direction.
All right, so somebody in the letters about this, maybe three, mentioned that the curb considered part of the sidewalk and therefore the property owner's responsibility, or is it part of the street and therefore the city's responsibility? That needs to be clarified. Any thoughts on that?
I'd have to look into if the curb is considered, or if it's the curb sidewalk is all one thing, so wouldn't be able to answer that right this second.
Any other questions?
Yeah, so all right, so I'll editorialize here. There are a lot of subpar, well below average condition sidewalks in this town that have nothing to do with city public works damaging them. They're just old. You had problems with trees that the city did not plant, etc.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go into that a little bit later after public comment. Is the intent of this to actually make a statement about enforcement? We're actually going to start issuing letters that lead to improvements? Because I don't think that's being done now, nor has it been done very much in decades, based on the condition of the sidewalks, because these are decades old bad sidewalks.
Yeah. So, you know, we have one code enforcement officer, and he's overloaded with a lot of things. But, you know, this is something that would be rolled out slowly, and it would be getting after the sidewalks that pose the greatest liability first. Because even though it's the responsibility of the property owner to keep this fixed, it's the city's responsibility to ensure that's done, and so the city gets sued.
If I may editorialize a little bit myself, to your point, City Manager, it is the government's responsibility that we enforce these criteria that we have, even though we haven't been.
Yeah.
Albeit, in my perspective, with the chief's increased time to effect repairs, because there really are two fundamental issues that we've got regarding sidewalks. One is bad sidewalks where they are, and two is missing sidewalks when properties change hand and they're supposed to be filled in, but they're not. And we can't, that's not on the agenda tonight, but it seems like a reasonable first step that we should take, albeit not exceptionally stringent all-at-once activities, but...
May I interject for further clarification? Are you saying that when properties change hands, automatically the sidewalk improvement is supposed to happen now?
My understanding is when a property changes hands that does not have a sidewalk in front of it, the new property owner has a year, I think, to put it to...
That's not being enforced.
Oh, yeah, right. And that's not being enforced. And all I'm trying to get to is that we probably should at least try and fix the sidewalks we already have.
Yes. Agreed.
And
But
Chief,
more to come,
and Chief, thank you for the...
It's a little bit more complicated than that, and I'll get to my editorial later.
Okay.
Any questions before we open up? All right, we will open up to public comment. Come on up.
Okay, my name is Peggy Risch, and I hope that you all had a chance to read my comments that I sent out. So, I do agree with the chief that 2 weeks is a really short time, and so I do support that extended time. I did suggest in my comments that we have some estimates for what some of these repairs might cost the residents. As we all know from some of the information in the housing element, much of our city residents are on limited incomes. Many are seniors, some are below poverty level. So I think we need to be aware of exactly what kind of financial burdens that we would be putting on these residents, even though it already exists, that it is their responsibility. So I would ask for some information on those costs. I found a big range from being not much to being a lot. So the biggest point that I have with moving forward is my objection to putting in the municipal code chapter 12.08, which doesn't exist in our current sidewalk repair and maintenance ordinance. And the reason is that if you read through all those provisions, which I tried to provide for you, the most significant ones in my comments, is that it's an extra financial burden on the residents to appeal. I've only done one appeal, and it was over $900. And what this municipal code requires, which didn't exist when I participated in an appeal, it actually requires that not only their appeal fee, but administrative cost, as well as fines can be levied. And so it's much more than going beyond giving the residents to object to the requirement or object that it could be the fault of a tree root or city's fault or something like that. And therefore the burden really, that process really becomes burdensome for a community member to actually do. So I would ask you to look at those provisions very carefully. I think you can take out some of the aspects of that municipal code that fit what the chief is going for without implementing all of them. You can eliminate the burdensome financial ones. Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. Anyone online?
Our first speaker online will be Johanna.
Okay, Johanna, begin when ready.
Good evening again. I sent 2 emails today for your consideration on this topic, and I very much appreciate that the chief wants to allow more time to make repairs because contractors are often months out, and I would even consider saying 90 to 120 days be considered. I also agree with Todd that it is a good idea not to rewrite California law, at least not substantially. Because this information was only received 2 to 3 days ago, I'd like to ask that this topic be continued to a future meeting so that all the implications can be fully reviewed and understood by the public and yourselves. For example, like the code text, what is the exact proposal for the municipal code change? Does this apply only to sidewalk concrete damage, or does it apply to snow on top of the sidewalk? I think from the background and summary, it says how it's unrealistic to correct deficient sidewalks, like, who makes that, how is that unrealistic? The penalties, I think that the fact that penalties could go up to $100,000 at $2,500 a pop for administration, plus the actual costs, plus possibly temporary costs, could be very burdensome. I think, are we trying to make housing even more unaffordable in this city? And it's also going to impact long-term rentals. I think these are excessive penalties. Notification of the property owner. I would like to ask that notices actually be received by the property owner and overtly acknowledged. I'd like to recommend that on significant issues that an email perhaps be sent and at least a 7-day USPS mail delivery allowance be considered. And if there's no owner acknowledgement, that the city follows up with a call. Otherwise, I could see owners racking up fees with not even knowing about it because people are on vacation. Also, I'd like to have you consider that some of the sidewalks, especially in downtown, are heavily used sidewalks, including Pine Street and Commercial, which are R3 or commercial zones. And they get excessive use and more garbage than normal. Also, some owners, like you mentioned, have no sidewalks at all, which is the opposite. Damage and inspection criteria, such as cracking and puddling, some of this is existing and some of it is caused by the city. Anyway, I would like to ask this be continued to a next meeting so that this can be better reviewed, because right now there was not enough information to fully review this. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Johanna. And just so you know, this is not an action item. This is just giving direction for more information.
Okay, thank you. I did see that, but I wasn't really clear. And if this is a meeting where it's being considered, I'm wondering if we're not going to have a future meeting for consideration, which means we kind of lose that time to actually consider it and have these better in-depth discussions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Vicki Gold.
Hello, Vicki. Begin when ready.
One question. I looked at the pamphlet, which is a very nice pamphlet, but on the very end of it, it says, please note that regardless of who the tree belongs to, it is still the owner's responsibility to pay for the sidewalks when they are damaged by roots according. And I don't know what that means. So I think that was just a grammatical error, but I think if you're going to be circulating the pamphlet, that should be corrected. Secondly, I agree with what Peggy and Johanna said, that penalties are my principal concern. I think that $2,500 a day and a max of $100,000 is such a heavy burden for people, and many people cannot afford that. I certainly would lose my home if that were imposed upon me. The other thing is, I'm sure all of you have had the experience of being told that when you have a tree, an arborist come or somebody to do some cement work, there is often a 2 to 3 month backlog. And I think that is true now as it has been in the past. So I would like to see the time period extended from the 60 days to half a year. I mean, I think it's maybe 120 for arranging for it, but many times I've called contractors and they haven't even gotten back to me for 2 weeks because they're so busy. And the other thing is, I think that there could end up with, if you're having people do their own work with contractors. I have recently seen an example of a very long time cement person who did a terrible job and it had to be redone. You'll end up with a kind of crazy quilt of cement patching. So much better if the city could do it and do it at the most reasonable rate and offer by seeking grants and loans at the very lowest interest rate that they could extend to the homeowners so that there's a consistency in the quality of the work. And I'm sure that there are grants for this kind of safety issue, particularly. There must be. I know you're all, both Muriel and Todd and others have sought grants for miscellaneous items, and this seems to be a very important one to be able to bring them up to standard as you described. They're not. Downtown it's particularly important, but I think if there is a delay, you could put up barriers showing that this is a dangerous place to walk. And I thank you.
Thank you, Vicki. And just a clarifying point, it's 60 days to fix or be contracted to fix. So if it does take 6 months, if you're in contract to do that, then that would be okay. No one else. All right, we will close public comment, back for discussion, for direction.
I'm willing to start. Frankly, I think the sidewalk maintenance proposal is quite good. There were some questions, well, let me, before I get to questions that I have about the proposed ordinance, in the handbook on page, which is page 43 of our agenda, it's the last page of the handbook that a speaker referred to earlier. It talks about whether the tree is a city tree or not. It's still the responsibility of the owner. I would put in probably a qualifier in that sentence indicating unless it was the city tree that caused the damage. Yeah,
I'll reword that. I think it's really more unless it's determined there is city liability for the cause of the damage, whatever it is, whether it's a snowplow.
Something like that. Otherwise, I thought the guide really was quite well done.
You know, I think if I can just state, again, this is state law. We don't need to put this in and provide this extra time. And you know, I don't want to respond to specific comments directly, but with the 30 days and 30 days, if you haven't done your due diligence to try to get estimates and at least tie somebody up to do the work, even if it's 9 months down the road. The idea of providing an estimate, if you walk that logic down, then it puts the city in a position where the homeowner gets the estimate and says, well, that's too much. And then you get into a haggling situation where you can't have that. If the state says it's required to be fixed, it needs to be fixed. And if you're having the city do it, most likely, and I don't want to state this, overstate this, because in some cases the city doesn't have the bandwidth to do it. They would hire a contractor. But if the city can do it, they're going to probably do it at the cheapest rate because it's at the city rate. You know, I don't want everybody out there to go, I'm going to skip the 2 30-day notices because the city's going to do it cheaper. But ultimately, that's my concern with that issue.
So going to the ordinance itself.
Right.
First of all, I agree with your comments. I think the ordinance for the most part is quite well written. And when I was on the Active Transportation Committee, we had drafted a proposed sidewalk maintenance program, which frankly we plagiarized from other cities, for the purpose of achieving the goal of having improved sidewalks, and this does that. In terms of the leaning, putting a lien on a person's property, if the city ends up doing the work, then the question would be, of course, does it bear interest, and what sort of payment terms might there be over what period of time?
And if I may, a lot of that is covered under the 5625 through 5630 section of the Street and Highway Code. So it's already in the state law when you can put the liens on, issuing bonds, that kind of stuff is all covered under the state code.
Okay, good. And I don't know, Peggy mentioned appeal costs of $900 for some unrelated appeal in the past. I don't know what that was, but
the intent is to have no appeal cost.
Okay.
Yeah, so
I was going to suggest something like that.
1.05. So right now, if you have an appeals hearing board for a parking ticket, there's no cost to you.
Okay.
And then I do have an answer for Councilmember Collins. According to our municipal code under 1208A, Section A, sidewalk defined, it does include curbing. Yes, so the definition is sidewalk as defined in this chapter, area between the property line and street line, includes curbing, parkways, parking strip, driveways, and also retaining walls, bulkheads, or other works for the protection of any sidewalk, parkways, parking strips, or driveways.
So I won't be at the first meeting in May, but I can just express my support for this proposed ordinance for the benefit of the other council members.
Mr. Chairman. So, as Tim stated, the prospective ordinance is well written and consistent with state law. I don't really think that's the issue here. The issue is enforcement and the reality that, as the city manager stated, a lot of people are going to opt for a city to do the work. So let's put that on hold for a second. I also think if we're going to pinpoint particular sidewalks, there is the issue if whoever it is that fixes it, whether it's the city or a contractor, whether there are infrastructure pipes, in other words, that are going to have to be improved. And why bother fixing the sidewalk if you're just going to destroy it again because some pipes have to be improved, whatever they may be. So that's one of the complications I think we have to take into consideration. If, however, the sidewalk has no pipes underneath it, and it is clearly an ADA problem or a safety problem for anyone, such that people are walking onto the street, and that's the case in front of my place, which I rent, so it's not my responsibility technically. I'm the one, as one of our prior public speakers mentioned, that I have a teeter-totter cement block that's on a tree root, and it's been like that for decades. Yeah. So, complications. I can only suggest, as I think this is going to devolve down the city doing a lot of concrete work on sidewalks, that an assessment district where we asked the parcel owners if they would be willing to pay $50 a month to get the sidewalks improved might be appropriate if we're also talking about having other elections. Don't have to do this until 2024, but might be something to consider to see if parcel owners like that idea versus lump sum big contracts. But like I said, I think the city's gonna end up doing most of the work, and so we're gonna have to solve the costs and chase the money.
So if I
Not
can.
the money at all, when we're waiting for properties to change hands and getting it out of escrow and that type of thing.
So my comment, if I could address that, is the way the California ordinance is written in our ordinance is that after those 2 30-day periods elapse and you don't have somebody tied up, that the city would do the work, or a contractor that is assigned by the city, and the majority of it probably will be done by a contractor, just because we're going to have a lot of work to be done. So you don't really know who's going to be doing the work for you, and frankly, the city just can't take on that much sidewalk work, so a lot of it's going to end up going to a contractor.
And the advantage of doing that is also a contractor doing several different sidewalk repairs all at once could be more efficient.
And to capture the other point that you mentioned about infrastructure, this is part of, where you get into too much, regulation if you try to write this into the ordinance. But the idea here is if you cite somebody and we need a sidewalk repaired, part of that needs to be coordinated internally with Public Works to see if there is infrastructure that needs to be fixed in that area, and then an arrangement is made where we then postpone potentially the repair of that sidewalk until the infrastructure improvements are made, because the idea of having somebody have to come in, pay for their sidewalk to be rebuilt and then torn up and then bear that cost again is just not reasonable.
City Manager, to Councilmember Stackfleth's logic stream, even if it does get lots of times outsourced to independent contractors to do this, or delayed and batched, isn't it true that the city still has to pay for it? Even if there's a lien, the lien doesn't get collected until the property changes hands. Is that correct? Or
well, a bill is sent to the property owner for the work.
Right.
If they are scofflaws, just like any other, city regulation where people fail to follow through on, like say a CDBG home repair loan, it is attached to a lien. But you're right. I mean, in those cases, you have to wait, but if, until that property changes hands or they come into money. But, we will get paid, and we need to move this forward because we will lose a lot more in paying out lawsuits than worrying about the elapsed time and the patient equity required in waiting for that lien to be paid off.
money for lawsuits, always a counterbalancing
Yeah.
perspective. Thank you.
Carry on. So you're not worried about the cash flow issues of having to pay contractor after contractor. I think most people are going to opt for the city to do the work. I think you're getting some indication of that from the public speakers tonight. And we do need to start this process, and we do need to have this code, and we do need to start this enforcement, but I'm just worried that the city is going to find that the cost of doing this is higher than we.
And we had, the
So
idea.
therefore, back to the assessment district. And if people reject that, then.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Ultimately, we have to look at our budget and our times that we have, and who's available for contract work. And really the idea is, then if we need to slow things down, we slow things down. And really what we're trying to do is start making a dent in the worst sidewalks that are going to get us sued. And if it takes time, at least we're addressing it.
And if I may, just help with what the state law says under section 5629 for collecting the money. It says, therefore, the amount of the lien shall be collected at the same time in the same manner as ordinary city taxes are collected, and shall be subject to the same penalties and interest and to the same procedures under foreclosures and sale in case of delinquency as provided for ordinary city taxes. All laws applicable to the levy collection and enforcement of city taxes and county taxes are hereby made applicable to special assessment taxes. So the state law writes in that we're going to get our money back.
That's a big cudgel.
So it sounds like if it does get out of hand, we'll just slow the amount of job.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
We have to.
But we make progress.
Oh, no, we need to
There's,
do
there's,
this. This is decades.
there's a seesaw.
Deferred maintenance beyond reason.
So Chief and City Manager, are you clear with direction, or do we need to formally give some direction?
We've received the message.
Okay. All right. If there are no further comments, we will move to agenda item 11. There are no outside meetings. Agenda item 12, future agenda items and meetings appearing on the agenda within 60 to 90 days. A, 23-24 budget on 5/8/23. B, authorization for a 7th police officer position, 5/8/23. C, housing element, 5/22/23. D, vacation of Field Street, TBD. E, discussion and possible action, McLeod Avenue parking prohibition, TBD. F, sidewalk ordinance, TBD. Future agenda items over 90 days, discussion, possible action, review, Chapter 13.95, extraction and exportation of groundwater from the city of Mount Shasta. Anything to add? Would it be advantageous or maybe too presumptuous at this time to add in the election items for TOT and drainage as a future agenda item?
Yeah, because it's coming.
Okay.
One other thing. Chief, you mentioned when I asked about a month ago about whether or not private citizens can just use public trash receptacles for their own garbage. You said it was not in the, later on you said it was not in the municipal code to make that it's not illegal. I would like to get that on the agenda as possibly changing that so people can't just use garbage as their own.
Okay, so if I'm clear, I'll start working on that. That would be to prohibit the dumping of business and personal trash into the public receptacles in the downtown business district, the round ones we're talking about. Okay, I'll get on that.
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? All right, we are adjourned.
I'll take that. I'll try to read track.